Good morning and welcome to How to Access Small Business Funding, which is the first installment of the Detroit Regional Chamber's Black and Diverse Owned Business Series. I'm Tammy Carnwright. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Detroit Regional Chamber. Throughout 2021 and 2022, the Chamber is proud to host a series of events that will help small, medium, and large diverse-owned businesses in Southeast Michigan to help with their growth going forward into the future. This series is a part of the Chamber's Racial Justice and Economic Equity Initiative. You know, the ideal Detroit region is an equal and fair community where all people have the opportunity, the resources, and tools to achieve their potential and lead healthy and fulfilling lives with rewarding work. This will lead to a more robust economy and a greater community well-being. I encourage you to visit detroitchamber.com/equity so that you can learn more about the Chamber's efforts to advance racial justice and economic equity. Before we start our program, I really do need to give a shout out and thank Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan, who will be the sponsor of this entire series. They're a great partner to the Chamber, and I thank them very much for sponsoring this important series, which will have great information to share. So with that, I am going to turn, we have a great panel, fantastic panel actually, that you are going to really enjoy, and I need to let you know you are one of the largest audiences that we've had in our virtual programming. I want to remind you, if you've not participated before, there is a question box. It's on the right-hand side of your screen if you want to submit questions. The moderator will be asking questions, and then we'll work some questions in from everyone as we can. Not sure we'll get to all of them, but we'll certainly try our best. So with that, at this point, I'm going to turn you over to a fantastic moderator of the discussion, Paul Jones. And Paul is the Business Support Network Director at Invest Detroit. Kicking it over to you, Paul.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you, Detroit Regional Chamber and Blue Cross for hosting this panel where we will discuss a extremely important and timely issue or subject, which is getting access to funding for your small business. The New Economy Initiative recently did a survey which showed that, to no one's surprise, access to capital was the #1 barrier for small businesses. I guess it showed us what we intuitively knew, that everybody wants and needs money. I guess that's why we call it money, but no one has enough of it. In this panel, we have subject matter experts who are going to walk us through the process of accessing that sacred resource that we all need to fuel and grow our business. So with that, I would love to introduce our panel of experts, and I will start with allowing them to introduce them because I probably would not do it justice. I will start with Elaine Cohen. Elaine, if you can introduce yourself.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Elaine Cohen. I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity Officer with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. I've been with the organization about 10 years, and I'm currently in the process of transitioning out of access team that focuses on access to capital and loan enhancement, working with lenders to help small businesses get the access to funding that they need. So, and then in my new role, I'm focusing on our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, both internally and externally, and making sure that we're really providing an equitable economy for all. So, thanks, Paul.
Thank you, and welcome to the panel. Shannon Smith.
Good morning. My name is Shannon Smith. I'm with SWS Capital Management, which is the asset manager broker that manages Clear Vision Impact Fund, which is a $250 million fund that is investing capital in minority-owned businesses, specifically Black-owned and Latinx-owned businesses that have inclusive growth and have revenues up to $150 million positive EBITDA in at least 2 years of operating history. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Devon Sanders. love to have you introduce yourself.
Sure, thanks, Paul. And I want to thank Tammy and the Chamber for putting forth such a great host of panelists, as well as the hard work and effort that has been put into kind of closing the gap between racial and equity. Duran Sanders, as Paul mentioned, I serve as CEO of SG Companies, which really is a portfolio of companies that specializes in this real estate and energy space. But I wear another hat, and that hat is with Grow Michigan 2. I serve as a strategic advisor on the management team. Grow Michigan 2 can be found at growmichiganfund.com. We're a mezzanine debt fund that hopes to work with borrowers and small and middle market businesses, and specifically minority businesses. It's a partnership with First Independence Bank, where we're looking to grow, provide growth capital, as well as advice, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, James Dunn.
Yes, thank you and good morning to all. I am the Chief Operating Officer at First Independence Bank, and as Duran just mentioned, we are a minority-owned financial institution located and headquartered in the city of Detroit. We have been working on a number of ways that we can have greater impact on the community, and we're looking at lending programs specifically targeted to small startup businesses or existing small businesses in local communities. As part of that initiative that we've been working on, we're hoping to partner up with other entities and to expand the number of companies that we can use as resources to assist businesses that might approach us with a request.
Wow, that's a lot. We're extremely fortunate to have you on the panel, so welcome again. I want to take a quick pause, and to the audience, I know that in the Zoom environment, we're certainly used to multitasking and passively listening, but I would encourage you to put everything to the side, zone in so you can get a proper return on your attention investment, because we're going to chop it up, we're going to get into the weeds, and we would love to make sure that you are there for each part of the journey. So the journey is going to follow as such. I'm going to jump in and ask the panelists some one-on-one questions. So we'll go around and get some detailed information from them. Then we're going to have a couple of roundtable questions. And most importantly, we're going to make sure that at the end, we're going to have 15 to 20 minutes where you, the audience members, can ask your questions, and we have that interactive dialogue. So let's jump on in. Elaine, I'm going to start with you. In your role, actually, no, I'm sorry. I'm going to start with James. I'm going to go reverse and throw it back around. James, I think we've all known that's important to have a strong relationship with a financial institution. And in this last round, or this last funding of PPP, that became even more evident. Working with a traditional financial institution, what advice would you provide to small businesses as they're considering and selecting a financial institution to build a relationship with?
Well, it's kind of interesting because as part of the lending programs that we've been trying to develop, we did some research on that, and the Small Business Administration has done some studies and had determined that 71% of the small business applications that were submitted to smaller banks were approved, whereas larger banks had an approval ratio that was smaller at 58%. So one of the benefits of working with a smaller banking institution is that they're a little more focused on smaller loan relationships, and it's kind of their core business. So they're going to pay more attention. In addition, I think smaller financial institutions, over a period of time, when you're in the industry, you develop resources, people that you know that can help somebody that might need some assistance, so that you have a number of contacts and information that you can share with the small business applicant. Even if you can't sometimes help them, you might know someone that can. And so that opening up that relationship and getting that going early on gives you the ability to get referrals to other resources that could be useful to you in your business. And then also it gives the banker an opportunity to know who you are and what your business plans are and how you're preparing for them, what your business plans look like. And sometimes they can direct you into what you need to do to put your business on the ground and get it going.
That's an excellent point. So I think a takeaway from that is that you really can't start that process too early. And I guess waiting until you need capital to build that relationship is almost starting it too late. Does that sound accurate?
Right, because when you talk to the banker, if you have a business plan put together, or if you don't, so if you don't have a business plan put together, we have resources that we can refer an applicant to, saying to talk to this particular organization. The SBA has a SCORE program that actually has an online business plan that's very comprehensive, and it directs you into how to put together a plan that when you approach a lender and say, well, look, I'm really looking for financing, and I've got a business plan put together. You should, and the lender can go through that business plan and see that all of the areas that are going to cause you problems in starting up your business have been addressed and considered by you, and you've figured out how you're going to solve those particular issues. And again, the lender can also, if they're not able to lend money to initially, if you're talking to a commercial bank, they would have other resources such as Grow Michigan or Invest Detroit or other sources that the bankers know of that say, well, this is the kind of loan that they would be a very good fit for. And it helps to get a referral from a banker to those organizations, because oftentimes they'll have a discussion about, I really think this is a good, well thought out business plan. It's just not something that's ready for commercial banking yet. Perhaps you can help. So it's a good first start almost in any situation because of the referral network that the banker might have for you.
That's an excellent point, James. And I want to use that. I want to leave off there and segue with those points to a question for Duran. So, Mr. Sanders, to be quite frank, I think a lot of us non-financial professionals view finance guys and women as being on the non-creative side. And I think that's for a good point, because what I've learned is that if you get too creative as a finance person, you get indicted. So we don't want you getting too creative in that space. But I guess the point is that in addition to like the terms of the loan, there's a lot more value that your financial partner can bring to that relationship. Pre-loan, post-loan, can you describe some of those items or those different wraparound services that a small business should proactively look for and even ask for or mandate from their banking or lending relationship?
Sure. So great question, Paul. And when you look at Grow Michigan too specifically, and I'm obviously biased, but one of the taglines that you'll see that we really promote is bridging the economic gap for all, with capital and advice. And so the thing that I'd like to highlight is the all and the advice. And so one of the things that we were very specific with in comparison actually from Grow 1 to Grow 2 when we transitioned was the advice part. You know, a lot of times businesses, capital is always, one factor, but what they lack sometimes is advice. And sometimes that's more important than the capital. And so we were very specific in adding an advisory board that includes a number of folks that have been in industries that will provide that advice. And so, two things I want to kind of piggyback off of what Jim shared earlier, the relationship piece. When looking at, outside of the terms of the deal, when developing a relationship with a bank or a capital source or a non-traditional lending source like Grow Michigan 2 or others, you really want to develop a relationship with that individual within that shop and or the shop specifically, such that they understand your business. And the other thing is track record. Sometimes I think borrowers consider themselves to be synonymous with bankers. And really, that's not the case. I mean, Grow Michigan needs borrowers for us to be able to capitalize on our mandate. Invest Detroit needs borrowers. We need good borrowers, et cetera. So we shouldn't always have this beggar mentality and know that when we're going in with a great business plan and positive EBITDA in some cases or not, that they're looking for us as much as we're looking for them. And so the second piece is track record. I would say, you want to make sure that you work with an institution that has developed a track record. I mean, Grow 1 put forth 34 investments that aggregated $56 million in total. There's some banks and lending institutions out there that'll leave you kind of hanging dry at the at the altar, if you will. So you want to do your research and know that you have options. There's a lot of liquidity out there, and banks, financial institutions, and mezzanine debt funds like ours are looking for good borrowers.
Great, and that's we certainly don't want to be left at the financial altar, but that the track record is a huge point. I do want to follow up on that, but I'm really anxious to ask Mr. Shannon Smith the question. So Shannon, despite your youthfully good looks, you've been around the ecosystem for a really long time, and you've seen what the pain points were and how it was in the DC days before Corona, when everybody was hugging strangers and giving random people high fives, to what it looks like now in this post-COVID or COVID variant situation. Lots of new funding coming to the table. FinTech has played a greater role. Governments throwing money into the pot. What's the lending environment now? What do you see in this? I didn't want to say post-COVID because we're in the middle of it, but in this new norm?
Yeah, I think a lot of innovation happened, and we certainly do see that in crisis. We're quick to figure out a solution. But specifically, I think we saw a unique time where no matter the company, when in March 2020, no matter the company who ran the company and the revenue size, everyone was looking for capital to survive the shutdown. But what wasn't surprising but highlighted was the challenges that minority-owned businesses face in getting that capital, especially as it related to PPP funding. And we certainly saw the emergence of what I've been kind of labeling as the robot banker. The silver lining would show what automation could do to benefit minority-owned businesses by removing some of the human involvement that could perhaps explain some of the disparities we're seeing in the businesses of the same type, similar revenues, but different color founders. We also saw foundations switch their funding criteria and make exceptions to get businesses through the pandemic, outside of their objectives and their pillars. And I think before, during, and after COVID, we started to see intentional funds like ours, a non-traditional lender, the Clear Vision Impact Fund, that said, we believe the U.S. low to middle market businesses, especially Black and Latinx owned businesses, they represent a large, attractive lending opportunity. And so we stepped in, especially if you look at the gap in GDP in a region like Michigan, where we could have been $29 billion stronger in the 2014 study, a 13% increase in GDP if the racial gap in income had been closed. Access to capital to minority-owned businesses and hiring and the revenue growth that they see with that certainly does go a long way in making sure that our economy as a whole grows, by making sure those who are left out are able to get equity at that table.
So I want to just point out to the audience that through Duran and Shannon and James as well, all of them have funds or pots of capital that there's a focus on traditionally underserved businesses. So I mean, I don't want to make the point too obvious, but reach out to them, because it sounds like that's a great start, and that they're here to help. Another side of the equation with extremely large pot of capital is the federal government and the state. And I think many of us have heard about these programs. Some of it seems to be blended, alphabet soup almost, SSBCI, ARPA, and all these other things that have just sprouted up in the last few months. So we know that money's coming, but what we don't know is where it's going to land. And we don't know, and I think even further from that is we're not sure how we can, if we can, influence that process as small business owners. So Ms. Cohen, I think in your role, I think you would be, this is a space in your category where you can provide, I guess, some guidance on how important is it for small businesses to advocate for the usage and distribution of funds, and how they go about it. What does advocacy look like, and what does effective advocacy look like?
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, I would definitely say, and as you mentioned, there is just a lot of money coming into the state of Michigan at the local, state, and the federal level, and it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to utilize this funding to make an impact state, we've really been trying to be intentional in how we structure a lot of these funds coming in to make sure that we are going to use this money in the most impactful way that we can. I know that for the SSBCI program in particular, with that, we have since the stimulus plan passed back in March, we have been reaching out across the entire state between technical service providers, lenders, and we even did an RFI a few weeks ago as well, because we want to hear from the ground level what's needed out there. And I think that's where the advocacy comes in, because we recognize as a state that we are not on the ground. We are one step removed from, what the market conditions are right now, what borrowers and lenders actually need from us. And so we have been constantly reaching out to each and every one of those groups to figure out what it needs and how to help usually build capacity so that groups that are already doing really good work can kind of continue that and maybe expand work that's already being done, and trying to take some of those programs and like if you have Detroit that's working really well, like how can we make that work for the entire state? So I think that the advocacy at that point is making sure that you're in touch with your local service providers, regional lenders, CFIs, because that's where we're getting all of our information.
Gotcha. So talking to people like James and other CDFIs in the community is a good starting point, and letting them know what you're looking for and raising your voice, because as a small business owners, you are the true protagonist in this story. It's all about making sure that you have the resources that you need, and we're here to support and elevate your voice. So I'm going to transition to a roundtable discussion, and here we're going to get into the meat of things a bit. I'll throw a question out there. Anybody just jump in and respond. So I'll start off by just saying, in the first chapter of my book, which hasn't been published yet, it actually hasn't been written yet, but the first chapter is called Knowing Your Ask with the K. And that's a big part of getting capital, knowing how much you need and what you need it for. So with that in mind, there are several steps that small businesses need to have in place before they actively engage or expect some traction with the lender. What, in the spirit of this topic, what are the steps to get access to capital? Just to put it quite blunt and direct. What are the 3 or 4 things that business owners can do right now, take away and work on this afternoon to get them to the path of getting past that barrier of capital?
I would say, as I mentioned earlier, a very strong business plan is probably the most important thing that you can put together. I looked recently at an individual that wanted to get into the food truck business, and he had been working from just like street locations and cooking his food on the street and selling it. And he said, well, I've been doing that for a couple of years, and I think it's time for me to get into a food truck. And he says, well, do you have any numbers on what your sales were, or your costs, or any of the expenses? It's like, well, no, not really. And it's like, okay, well, how do you put together a business plan when you don't have any financial information, and you had an opportunity to create a great base for your business plan by talking about what your sales were historically while you were just selling from a street corner versus what you expect to do when you open a food truck. And so when we talked about that, I referred him to the SBA SCORE program where you can get that business plan. I said, start to put this together in a fashion that's in line with what you've been doing on the street, what your costs are, what your revenues are, what your expenses are, and associated, and try to recreate, if you can, as much of that as you can. Because when the lender is looking at, can I support this business, the most important thing is, how carefully considered is the business? How well planned out? What's the likelihood of success? Because I would suggest that with a very solid business plan, the likelihood that your business will be successful, it goes up tremendously as compared with, I have an idea, I'm just going to launch this. So I think the business plan is step one.
Yeah, and let me add on too, Paul, if you don't mind. I've mentioned a couple of the hats that I wear. The third hat that I wear actually is with Jim Dunn. I serve with First Independence Bank and sit on the executive committee. So we review a lot of loans for businesses, real estate, et cetera. And I guess to add to Jim's point, I would add that your personal story, your personal credit, all the things, when you're a small business, until you kind of get to a certain level of scale, it is really going to be, we're looking at you as the individual, separate and distinct to to some extent from the business. And we're looking at who the jockey is that's actually riding that horse, and the horse being the business. And so I would, suggest that, your personal credit score, really do as much as you can to make sure that you're credit worthy, high sevens, low eights, get that together. Make sure that when someone Googles you, there's not, things that come up and about or whatnot. Because literally, I mean, sometimes during loan committee, we'll Google a business or a person behind that business or whatnot. So just let's not forget, how important the personal aspect of you tied to the business is as well.
Yeah, I just quickly add on, of course, we mentioned the financials, the past, the present, and the future. I always say, what is the business made to date, where you are currently, and then, your projections, and then assumptions to those projections. Okay. You can say you feel that you're going to make, double the amount that you're going to make this year, but be able to really, walk, the lenders or walk the investors through the assumptions on getting there. The business plan, of course, a strong management team is definitely a key thing. It definitely shows lenders and investors that you have been very considered around not only making sure that you are in place to grow your business, but you build people around you that you can trust and that are smart, that can help you build that business as well. In addition to that vision for the growth of the company, where do you see that company in 5 years? Do you have a handle on that vision? And then I would say one of the more important things that I certainly zoom into is the ask. As you mentioned earlier, what are you asking for and why? Your sources and uses. If you're asking for 5 million, are you able to explain how you will spend every single penny of that 5 million, even if those assumptions aren't all the way true? It just shows that you have an understanding for how you're going to invest capital into your business to grow to your next step.
So it sounds like, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I can add on to what James had said earlier, in that taking advantage of some of the resources that exist. SBA Score is one. SBDC is another one that will help kind of put those business plans together. And they also have kind of that global view as to what's available. So maybe you're not ready for traditional lending right now, but they might be able to provide some insight as to what some grant programs look like across the state. So I think just utilize resources that exist and kind of talking to some of those groups will really help. So.
And I appreciate that, especially the last point, because as I listen to the things that are required, it seems like it can be a bit overwhelming, but knowing that there are resources out there. There are some questions about what's SBDC stand for, what CDFI stands for, and we'll touch on that in just a minute. People want to know specifically what programs you mentioned, because a lot of these programs, while we know it from our perch, many of the small businesses are so busy running their business, they don't know that these programs exist. So maybe we can find time during the Q&A to put some of this in the chat. There's one thing I want to touch on, and Shannon, you touched on it, but I think we need to spend a little bit more time on it. So there's a lot of stuff that's required, right? And I think one thing to keep in mind is what you're asking for is not just to make you guys feel good, but this is things that business owners should be doing anyway. So this is things that's going to make them that's going to make them successful and increase the survivorship in the long term. And there's going to be multiple purposes for this information. Now, some of the business owners, quite frank, may have, what I used to have, entrepreneur's credit, right? So they're not going to be ready for you yet, or some of them may not have, they may not be far along enough. At the same time, there's these loans or financial providers that we call predatory lenders, to be quite frank, that are pushing into our ecosystem. How, from a small business standpoint, what advice would you give to someone in terms of determining if the financial partner, if it's a predatory lender, meaning someone who's going to do their business damage by charging high interest rates, hidden interest rates, although it comes across as easy money, versus a lender that that may be non-traditional, but is still going to help them grow and give them the support they need. If anybody can take a stab at that before we jump into audience questions, because I want to make sure we get in front of that.
Well, you know, one thing I would think is that the group, you know, this group in particular, and all of us in our professional careers work to consult with businesses to help them to be successful. It seems that on, you know, internet lending now, there are people that will create a lending model based upon a FICO score and maybe a historical earnings, and they'll throw money at you because essentially if you have a high FICO score, you have probably a likelihood of paying back the loan more than somebody that has a lower FICO score. So it's not high decision type of lending. But what's missing sometimes with that type of lender is there's no consultative role. They're not helping you as a business person to guide you into those questions that you should be asking or those areas that you should be paying attention to. So as Duran mentioned, it's important that if you're not doing some of these things, you should be doing them, and you should be paying attention to this as a business owner, you know, what the future will look like, how are you keeping books and records and things of that nature that are important. And some of the internet lenders that will certainly lend you certain sums of money just based upon your FICO score and your history, they're not really helping you grow your business or helping your business to be successful. So each of us, I think, from our unique perspectives, have a consultative role that we're willing to help small businesses to succeed. And to do something without that doesn't mean you won't be successful, but you might miss the ability to get advice from people that have been there before you. And I think that can be very important.
Great. And that, I think that needs to be said. It's, some things may come across as easy, but these are things that you need to do anyway for the long-term success of your business. And we have partners who can tell you not only what's required, but give you resources, and many times free or subsidized resources to help you get there. A topic that comes up in this environment, has come up in the chat room, is grants. So we're out here making loans, but we've been sort of, I guess, conditioned to look for, rightfully so, for the free money first, right? So how do you, one, know what grants are coming out, and how do you work that into your decision to seek loan or committed capital? Capitalism require payback, and maybe Ms. Cohen, if you can discuss some of the grants that you're seeing, perhaps, or anybody, and then how does that factor into your decision to approach someone knowing that there may be free money on the back end?
I mean, I would definitely say that the biggest resource for finding some of the grants and stuff like that would be, you know, SBDC, Small Business Development Centers, which are located across the state, but then also your local economic development organization, because they're all kind of our partners. And so anytime the state kind of pushes out money, they're the ones who usually kind of disseminate that. But I do know that with all of the ARPA funds coming out, a lot of the regional economic development organizations are creating their own grant programs for their own regions, much like, you know, during the midst of the pandemic, MEDC did a whole lot in the way of COVID relief grants. I believe we launched 23 programs in 2020. So, but through that, I know that with all the funds coming in, a lot of the EDOs are trying to replicate that going forward with small business relief grants and of that nature. So keeping in touch with the regional economic development organizations and SBDC, I think would be my biggest recommendation.
Perfect. Yeah, again, I know that the landscape is changing so quickly that that's sort of working its way into the equation. Another question, again, just to, I can't avoid the big elephants that are in the room, but in terms of diversity and inclusion, it's no secret. I mean, most of us have known it for years that there's been institutional systemic challenges for underserved businesses. What are you seeing within your shop or outside that we should highlight? And into specifics, like we know these programs are coming about or are here, and these are programs that we should be aware of and taking advantage of.
I can Sorry, Shannon. I was going to say I could speak to that first. I do know that with all of the federal funds that are kind of coming into play, a focus on social and economically disadvantaged is huge. And so we're still waiting on what that guidance looks like, just because as a state agency, we are a little restricted into what we can do. But I do know that the feds are trying to work to make sure that a lot of these funds do get specifically targeted to economically managed groups. So I think that there will be more to see in the coming months as they start working through a lot of lines with these funds.
Thank you. Shannon, did you have?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we're all certainly seeing just a shift in sentiment from just corporate America and just institutions around the importance of, racial equity, especially as it relates to the credit markets. We've, historically have seen just such disparities in the credit markets, where there's a lot of data and research showing, I guess, the money that we leave on the table. And so a fund, like the Clear Vision Impact Fund, recognizing that, seeing a lot of businesses that, these are, very promising businesses, sustainable, that have been family owned, are growing, that have been just looking for the capital. And, that's one side of the equation. I think one unique feature, that I really do like that we have in our fund is, we really identify the challenges even of the network effect, right? When you have a business and you give them capital and they give you this plan for how they want to grow, and then we work on the other side to identify the companies or, maybe the large corporates that they're trying to build a bridge to, and we work with them to build that bridge. And how much revenue growth is on the other side of that bridge, it's something that we're starting to see, because on the other side of that bridge, a lot of large corporates are also making, these intentional efforts to diversify their supply chains. They're bringing in, supplier diversity leads. Their procurement departments are really taking this serious, where there's this relationship that's starting to build on both sides, for lenders, for companies, as well as those large corporates that are looking to give opportunities to more minority-owned businesses. And it's not a charitable an act. It's an act of just finding these businesses and giving them the contracts, because these businesses have been doing the work, continue to do the work, and they just need the capital and that bridge to be built to then show that they can do the work.
And that's an excellent point. I'm sorry, please go ahead, Ron.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul. Well, I was just going to add, I mean, Shannon is right on. I mean, Grow Michigan 2 compared to Grow Michigan 1 is so different. And one of the reasons why it was so different is specifically because, we partnered with First Independence Bank with an eye towards loaning to minority-owned businesses. And we intentionally put forth, I'll call it a floor, not even a ceiling, that says, of the $50 million or whatever we end up raising, because we're still in fundraising mode, 50% at least of that is going to be targeted towards minority businesses. And so I don't think you would have seen that necessarily, a few years or so ago. So there's a heightened awareness, a heightened sensitivity to really closing the economic equity gap in the minority community. So Shannon, I think you're spot on with your fund, our fund, and there's a number of other funds out there that are specifically dedicated. And I hate to be a pessimist, but I always think about things in terms of windows of opportunity. And as I look at the world right now, the window of opportunity is wide open. So take advantage of it while it's open.
That I appreciate some of the sentiment that came out of there, and one is that there's funding available for underserved, but there's other opportunities that will require funding to make the small businesses, put them in a position where they can take advantage of procurement programs or other things. Like still having that backing is part of the holistic approach to solving this. I have a couple specific questions. One for Mr. Sanders. The question is, has your organization considered using PACE financing to finish any capital stack? Where or what additional quasi-equity was needed for developers? So there's a lot to that. And I think that's a specific question. So maybe a summarized answer would be great, and we can get to some of the more general questions.
Yeah, so I'm familiar with PACE financing, and one of the highlights, I guess, associated with Grow 2 is we loan to manufacturing businesses, distribution centers, technology companies, et cetera. And I hate to say this because I'm in real estate, but one of the industries that we don't loan to, unfortunately, is real estate and construction. And so, PACE loans, et cetera, are typically kind of tied to real estate, et cetera. So we would unfortunately not have much involvement with a PACE loan.
I have a question, and I think it's appropriate. Many of the micro businesses, and specifically the solopreneurs, have been left out, and we see that there's a trend to growing the gig economy, to again starting your own business, and most businesses, like a large degree of businesses, are solopreneurs or have one or two employees, but these are the ones that are at least touched. How do we intentionally increase our engagement to make sure that these visionaries are part of the narrative, that we're feeding them and nurturing them in a more intentional way?
Hi, Paul. We have, again, with all the SSBCI funding coming to the state, that is kind of a huge charge that we've been given, with a large focus on the micro businesses, which is 9 employees or less. Because, I mean, truthfully, that is a big part of our economy, right? And for those businesses, those are the businesses that got left out when it came to PDP and a lot of the other things that are coming through. So that is where we've really been relying on our partners to tell us what is it that those businesses need. Maybe it's some of the technical assistance, maybe not necessarily financial literacy, but like, how do you get some of those marketing and HR type functions that you have one person that's kind of doing it all? How can you help them so that they are able to grow? So that's definitely something that we've been working on and trying to develop new programming around it. But I think that, and currently we do work with all of the major CDFIs within the state, with fees that can help any kind of business, regardless of industry, to where we provide an 80% guarantee on a loan, so that they are more willing to lend to smaller businesses that they wouldn't traditionally lend to, but with our guarantee they are more willing to do so. That you can see an expansion of that going forward, and then also just a big focus on how we can provide better technical assistance to suit their needs.
If I could answer that, we have been working on a program with the SSBCI where we would offer those 80% guaranteed loans, and we've talked to the state about that and said we're prepared to fund that in our community and to find those smaller businesses that could benefit from that success. But one of the things that we found during the PPP loan process, particularly when the second round came around, and it was no longer based on Schedule C income, but just Schedule C revenues, there were a lot of small businesses that approached us that we managed to successfully make PPP loans. And we were surprised at how many there were and how much their need was. And I really believe that an 80% guarantee loan focused on those particular businesses would help them to expand and grow. And that's part of the program that we've been working on. And we're kind of waiting, as the state is, for those funds to be committed and for the amounts to be determined. But we're hoping that program will receive support as well.
I'm going to put one pause out there just to create some common ground definition. We as a community at this roundtable can get into this, again, alphabet soup. So I want to just distill some of the things that were discussed. A CDFI is, I think the acronym stands for community. I gotta learn how to say community development financial institution. And these are mission-based lenders. They're not a traditional lender. There are several in the state of Michigan. Some are focused on women, like Michigan Women's Forward. Some are focused on different sectors of neighborhoods or demographics. But they traditionally lend to people with lower credit scores, sometimes not existing credit, and they're a bit more flexible. There's a proposal, from what I understand, that the state would provide some additional capital to these CDFIs and even guarantee a large portion of the loans. And what that means, if I understand correctly, is that for the small business owner, it means that help is on the way. It means that there's going to be even more capital available to you as an early stage business through the support of the federal and state government. So get in touch with your community development financial institution. And I think that we'll somehow get a link of resources out to the small businesses so they don't get lost in our alphabet soup and know how to take some tangible steps. Deron, I apologize for cutting you off, but I didn't want to lose anybody. I didn't want anybody to get frustrated.
No, that was good. I'm glad that you did. I wanted to take a quick moment to pat Jim and First Independence Bank on the back for a moment, because as Jim kind of talked about the second round, and really I would even go back to the first round of PPP loans, First Independence kind of took the non-traditional banking stance of providing PPP loans to those that they did not necessarily have a relationship with already. And so, you know, that was, if you can imagine, like the virtual line that existed around the block for businesses that were coming to banks, you know, asking for PPP funding. The folks that got first in line were those that already had existing relationships. And so I'm very proud of the fact that Jim, with his leadership and First Independence as an organization, you know, really took in, you know, those for-profit and nonprofit businesses that did not already have an existing relationship with. And then the second thing I want to say, because I'd be remiss if I didn't, you know, part of Go2's first seed funding actually came from the MEDC. And so the good hard work that Eileen and Chris Cook, you know, have done, you know, with us, they helped put us in business by providing us with a little over $9 million, which was seed funding for our overall fund, and then are also taking a first loss position. So it's like we're all working together for the benefit of the small minority business community or whatnot to really, you know, like I said earlier, take advantage of this window of opportunity. But it's a huge window of opportunity now with so many folks trying to work together for the benefit of such.
So I don't know. I know we're going to come up on time in a few, but I want to again contextualize a couple of things that are being discussed, and also specifically make sure that the businesses land in the right space for where they're at. We have experts that represent large buckets of money on this panel. Can you each specifically discuss what businesses should come to you or your shop? What are you looking for? And I would like to then leave it with Ms. Cohen to discuss the businesses that were not specifically addressed, what other resources, what CDFIs there are. And I can fill in some of those gaps as well, but I want you guys to go through. So yeah, a solopreneur may not be coming to you, Shannon. Maybe they are, I don't know, but I don't want to lead to any further frustrations that the small business community may have. So let's just be clear on what your target market is and who you're ready to help, like right now, as soon as we get off this panel.
Sure. Yeah, so I'll go. So we're supporting small, medium-sized businesses below 150 million in revenue, positive EBITDA, Black-owned, Latinx-owned businesses, or businesses that serve in predominantly minority markets. The businesses that we're looking for are ready to take a deal size, or our spaces are $2 to $15 million per. Industry agnostic. We're supporting organic growth, acquisition, market, customer, or product expansion, CapEx, restructuring, recap, and refinancing.
Perfect. Very succinct and to the point. I love it.
Okay, so as a traditional bank, we're more focused on the specific programs that we're trying to develop now that would serve the community better, I think, than the products that have been available in the past. So we are really looking at the SSBCI for that loan guarantee initiative, so that we would be able to find those particular businesses and identify those particular businesses that would benefit. And you know, our approach on that was loans in the $25,000 to $75,000 range. So that would be a very small business, even potentially startup businesses that would benefit from that guarantee program. And so that's unique. You know, our traditional banking, you know, we are a smaller bank, so we don't make loans right now greater than $2 million. We prefer to stay, we can, but we prefer not to. We prefer to stay in the, you know, 500 or 250,000 to $1.5 million range. And, you know, we're looking for, in that regard, you know, successful operating businesses with earnings and history, like any other bank would be. And so we're kind of more focusing in the community on our partnerships with the state of Michigan and with Grow Michigan too, to see how we can become more impactful than we have in the past. So, you know, right now that it's kind of, we're developing projects that are not presently available. The one thing that we can do, and even as a result of this particular conversation we're having today, you know, we'll reach out and find out from everybody, if we don't hear it here, how can you help us and how can you be a referral for us, so that when we have somebody that calls us that we're not able to help today, we can give them access to the resources that can. So it's also a matter of filling up our Rolodex so that we can help people that call us.
Great.
So Grow Michigan 2 is, as the name kind of suggests, focused on businesses that are based in Michigan. I mean, our whole thesis is to grow Michigan businesses, and then now with Grow 2, you know, with a specific emphasis on minority businesses. Similar to Shannon, you know, we want to support businesses that are looking to expand, grow, acquire other businesses, or job creation. We'll loan anywhere between $250,000 up to $5 million. And we're looking at businesses that have a range of revenues between $3 to $50 million. Typically, we want to look at a business that has a history of positive EBITDA. And as I kind of alluded to earlier, we kind of look at manufacturing, distribution, transportation, life sciences, technology companies, et cetera. And the only outliers are that we don't traditionally look at real estate and construction businesses.
Well, for MEDC's perspective, admittedly, my expertise lies within the SSBCI programs, the loan enhancement programs. That's really kind of where I've been for the last 5 or 6 years. That being said, MEDC as a whole has a breadth of resources, and I would suggest anyone kind of take a look at our website, michiganbusiness.org. We do have groups that focus on real estate, that focus on Main Street businesses. You know, we have our STEP program, which is really robust. It helps small businesses kind of expand and help market their products. So I think that MEDC has a whole raft of resources, regardless of what stage or what size your business is.
That's perfect. So it sounds like, to recap, James is working with 25,000 upwards, closer to 2 million. So that represents early stage, in some cases, even startup businesses. Deron is there for the next tranche, and then you have Shannon there for some of the larger transactions. I should say that in the interest of continuing to get a paycheck, that my employer is also a community development organization, Invest Detroit. And they're one of several that are in the area, but Invest Detroit specifically focuses on providing capital to businesses located in Highland Park, Hamtramck, in the city of Detroit, from 50,000 to over $1 million. And we do participate in real estate deals. which can go up to several $1 million. But we're there to support small businesses. There are other resources we want to make sure we get out to you. Michigan Women's Forward is a CDFI. I know they have smaller deal size. They do micro lending. Prosper Us, focused on various neighborhoods in Detroit, is another one. Detroit Development Fund. So I know I'm rattling them off, but I'll work with the chamber to make sure that we get these resources to you. And like the other participants on this call, they provide the full suite of support. So it's not just the transaction, but it's the relationship with this cohesive group. You're passed from one to another. So as you grow, there is a solution for everyone. And again, we all are successful only to the extent that we are providing capital to the underserved or to the businesses that need it. Any closing words? We have 2 minutes, maybe 3 left. So back of the envelope math, that means a minute or less that you may give to inspire the businesses to take their next step. Anything you guys want to leave with the crowd?
I would just piggyback on the earlier statement that Mr. Sanders said about just this window of opportunity. We are in a really unprecedented time in which, we do have institutions, corporates, and a lot of players that are really, starting to shift their focus and understanding the value of, closing this equity gap. And so as a minority-owned business across the country, especially in this region, it's really a great time to really tap into those resources, find those capital sources, but also come ready with your plan to be funded. Because, there are a lot of investors and a lot of funds that are looking to invest in some great businesses.
Sorry, and I know I said a roundtable, but I need to kick it back in the interest of everyone's time. And I know we were going to add a lot of great comments, but I think Shannon left us on an extremely positive note. So Shannon, thank you for that. Thank you all. This has been amazing. I hope that our audience, again, received a great return on their attention, the investment they've made in being here with us today. And Tammy, we're going to hand it back over to you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul. And I hope you all will join me in thanking this panel for all the information they shared today and their time. Great information. I really want to make sure I put a message in the answer chat. You have sent some great questions today, and what we're going to do is take all your questions, get responses from the panel, and we'll make sure and post that on our website so you all get those questions, because there were some great ones there that we couldn't get to. And I also think your questions are going to help us with curating future programs. You giving us input on what you need, what you want more information on is really important. In fact, the Chamber will be sending you all a survey after this to say, did this meet your needs? Or is there other information that we can share in the future? So we'll look forward to your input. So for now, again, thank our great panel, to Eileen, to Jim, Duran, Shannon, and especially Paul for your great moderating. Fantastic conversation. We appreciate it. Special, again, thanks to our Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan partners for sponsoring our series. We're going to be doing a lot more programs over the next few months. So again, we're going to need your input. We look forward to it, but also make sure you check out what else we're going to be offering. So to everyone here, to our great panel, to our fantastic moderator, I hope you have a really great day. Bye now.
Thanks all. Absolutely.
Thanks.